This is the podcast to improve your English listening skills while learning something new in English. Every episode, we bring you interesting topics in simple and clear English, so you can listen, learn, and grow. So, sit back, relax, and let's get started.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at something that I know a lot of people are curious about.
Oh, yeah.
And that is working on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
And specifically, we have some really interesting information coming out of Indonesia.
Okay.
That gives us some really great insights into what it's like to work on a cruise ship, both the good and the bad. So if you've ever thought about working on a cruise ship, or maybe you just know somebody who has, or you're just kind of fascinated by that world, this is going to be the episode for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who have a kind of a romanticized idea of what it's like to work on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
You know, they picture, like you said, the sunsets and the exotic ports and all the fun stuff.
The buffets.
Yeah, exactly. But this Indonesian source that we're looking at, it's really interesting because it doesn't sugarcoat anything.
Yeah.
It talks about like the good and the bad, the opportunities and the realities.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in and talk about some of those opportunities and realities. Because I know everybody wants to know, like, what's so great about working on a cruise ship. And the source starts out by talking about some of the benefits. And they're pretty tempting, like. Mm-hmm. Right out of the gate, they talk about salaries being pretty good.
Yes.
Especially if you have some specialized skills.
That's true. Yeah, the maritime industry in general, like they need people who have those specialized skills, so they're willing to pay for it. And the source was saying that a lot of times the Indonesian crew members that they were talking about, they were specializing in things like hospitality or entertainment.
Oh, interesting.
So they were able to use their cultural background and their expertise to really get ahead.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then, you know, on top of that, your room and board is covered.
Yeah.
So no rent, no grocery bills.
That's huge.
Even your uniforms provided for you. So think about that for a minute. Like if you're trying to save money or, you know, maybe travel the world or even like make a down payment on a house or something, that's a pretty big benefit.
It is. It's like a built-in savings plan almost.
Yeah.
And especially for people who are just starting out in their careers, or maybe they want to like gain some international work experience.
Right.
It's a really great way to do that.
And speaking of international work experience, you get to travel the world.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, that's like the biggest draw for a lot of people. You're literally hopping from one exotic port to another. Like, how cool is that to wake up in a different country every few days?
I mean, I can see the appeal for sure. It's definitely a very unique way to see the world. And it's not just about like checking things off a list, you know?
Right.
Like I went to Paris, I went to Rome. It's like you're actually living and working in these different places. So you're getting a much deeper cultural experience. And the source was talking about how like you're meeting people from all over the world, you're hearing their stories, you're learning about different cultures.
It's like a floating microcosm of the world.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like its own little self-contained city.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like its own little self-contained city.
And speaking of city, let's not forget about all the perks you get on board, like gyms, pools, recreation areas.
It's not all work and no play.
Right.
It sounds like they really try to make life enjoyable for the crew.
They do. They have really impressive facilities, but, and here's where things get a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
the source really emphasizes the need to have realistic expectations.
Okay.
You know, all those amazing benefits that we just talked about, they come at a price.
What do you mean?
Long hours, demanding work ethic.
Okay.
We're talking like 10-hour work days, 7 days a week.
Wow.
Sometimes no days off for months at a time.
10 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's pretty intense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a demanding job.
I guess it makes sense though when you think about it. I mean, you're operating this huge ship with thousands of passengers.
Right, exactly. And the source was talking about how, like, you know, time management is key. You have to be really efficient with your time when you're in port. You have to like maximize your time for sightseeing and exploring.
Yeah, I bet you learn to be super adaptable.
Oh, for sure.
And make the most of every opportunity. But I'm sure that constant hustle and being away from your loved ones for, 6 to 9 months at a time, that's got to take a toll.
It does, yeah. The source didn't shy away from the emotional challenges at all.
Yeah.
You know, imagine being surrounded by all these vacationers who are having the time of their lives while you're working these long hours.
Yeah, I bet.
You know, so it's like this constant exposure to leisure and fun, but you're not really a part of it.
Yeah, and then being away from family and friends for that long, that can lead to loneliness and homesickness, for sure.
Absolutely, and that's where those gyms and pools and recreation areas that we were talking about, that's where they really become important, because that's your outlet, that's your way to de-stress and escape from the intensity of the work and the kind of confined environment.
They become less like perks and more like necessities.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you mentioned the confined environment. Let's talk about the living situation for a second.
Okay.
Because you're sharing a small cabin with a coworker for months at a time. So free room and board is great, but at what cost?
Right. Imagine sharing a space the size of a walk-in closet with someone for 6 months.
Yeah, that could test anyone's patience.
For sure, yeah.
And then the source also talks about potential health impacts.
Yeah.
Both physical and mental.
It's not just the demanding work. It's the long hours, the lack of privacy, the stress of living at sea.
Right.
It can really take a toll on your body and mind.
So it's not all fun and games. But seriously though, we have to talk about the risks too.
Yeah.
Accidents can happen.
Yeah.
Emergencies at sea. It's not like being on land.
It's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
And the source really emphasized the importance of safety training and following protocol.
Right.
Because, cruise lines, they take safety very seriously, but it's still a job that demands a lot of vigilance and a certain level of risk tolerance.
Right. And then on top of that, you have the strict code of conduct on board.
Oh, yeah.
Like the rules and regulations, the discipline, the hierarchy. It sounds almost like a military operation.
Yeah, in some ways it is. When you have thousands of passengers and crew members in a confined space like that, there has to be a certain level of order and efficiency.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something to consider, you know? If you're someone who really values their flexibility and independence.
For sure. But it's interesting because that same structured environment that can feel so restrictive, it can also foster a really strong sense of community.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, the source was talking about how a lot of crew members, they form these really close bonds with each other. They're going through these shared challenges, they're living in close quarters, they're working together towards a common goal.
Yeah.
So it creates this kind of camaraderie and connection that you don't really find in a lot of other jobs.
So it's not all about strict rules and rigid schedules. There's this potential for deep connection too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of crew members, they end up forming lifelong friendships with people from all over the world.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's one of the unique things about working on a cruise ship.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here today.
We have.
We've talked about the good, the bad, and the maybe a little bit ugly of working on a cruise ship. But ultimately, it comes down to you. Do the rewards outweigh the sacrifices? Only you can answer that question.
That's right.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive today. And until next time, keep exploring.
Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe.